All right, so our next panel, which is enterprise video at the speed of sports. And I'm very happy to introduce Mike Davies, who we've done a few panel things along the way, over a few years, from Fox Sports. It's an amazing group of people. It's hard to realize how much of our live events industry, especially in Silicon Valley, came from sports. And many of our operators share with these people operating sports events. So Mike, it's all yours.
All right, let's see if we can get a 5-person panel done in half an hour, everybody, and go. What the hell, I already got a minute off? Jeez. All right, hey, we agreed we were just gonna do a quick 10-second intro down the line, just remind everybody who we are and kind of what we do with enterprise video, and then we'll get into it. Brett?
Brett Axler, live shows at Netflix.
Casper, NEP, Business Development.
Deon, LeCointe, Director, Network Solutions at Sony.
Todd Mason, CEO of Broadcast Management Group.
Andrew Michaels, Global Manager of Meta Video Productions at Meta.
Yep. All right, good. So, you know, one of the things that I know, and you know, at Fox we do some big shows, might even have a big show coming up in a little while, is that what's truly terrifying is doing enterprise video and corporate video. I'll tell you, there's no stress quite like doing a corporate video in front of all of your corporate peers. I mean, it's something actually quite different and there's an acute stress that I've yet to have a name for that is different than doing something for 4, 10, whatever million people. But Brett, I'm going to go down the line, and I want to kind of get into specifics on this panel in terms of, when you think about sports workflows and technology, not necessarily kind of bells and whistles, we'll talk about that next, but what are the kinds of things when you think about like REMI, cloud, centralized control rooms, highlight creation, these types of things, and everybody here has kind of sat the fence at one time or another between sports and enterprise, so this is a great panel. Talk to me about a couple of things that you've sort of found in sports that are translatable to enterprise video, and maybe even, well, we'll get to the other part later.
Absolutely. I think REMIs are the big one. It's still a hot topic of conversation. It's been a hot topic of conversation for years. I feel like the interesting thing is now being, almost 5 years post-pandemic era, 4 years post-pandemic era, I feel like a lot of companies have started to lean heavily into REMIs on the corporate side. It's interesting because, I mean, flashback almost 10 years ago, we were building a REMI control room down in Orlando, Florida, that was a pair of control rooms and a set of trailers in the Disney complex that was controlling all the games up and down the East Coast. We could basically hire a crew, 2 full control rooms of crews, all the support facilities, VOs, anything you possibly need, stick the crew in these 2 trailers in Orlando, Florida, and the single set of 2 crews could control basically, say, anywhere between 4 and 6 games up and down the East Coast in a single day. And I think now, and obviously there's a couple benefits to that, is you're not rolling as many trucks, so you're not rolling as many people between locations, you're not worried about the constant cost of putting people up and moving them between locations. You can also share the fact that you're sharing the same crews between these locations. You can't move a crew from, say, Boston to Maine in an hour between games, where having just a transition between these events, the same crew sitting in the same control room, it's something as simple as basically the switch of a feed, or even better, you have your servos set up where it's just an easy transition. Moving that over to the corporate world now, I think in the corporate world, again, people have started to lean into this, I want to say, a lot, especially a lot of the big tech companies. We did this at Google during the pandemic. Very first mandate was, hey, we're going home, figure out how to control all the executive events from your house. And I think now helping additional companies who have not leaned into that workflow yet and helping them understand how can you do that in a scalable way. It's pretty cool to think that any company could be located virtually anywhere, and you could run any of your global events, not needing to put your people on planes, put equipment on planes, be worried about dongles that are going to die in foreign countries and whatever hour, because everything's right there in your home base, and then just send out your bare minimum crews to be able to operate. So I think that's, it's kind of a...
So the bit distributed production being the big thing, and I think that we actually share a lot of that expertise between, enterprise and sports. Everybody looks over each other's shoulder. Exactly. Todd, I want to go to you. I'm sorry, Andrew, I want to go to you because being at Meta, what kind of similarities do you see from what Brett said?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us, at least, and agree with a lot of things you said, Brett, but like reliability being the mainstay. I think that like in live sports, it's a no-fail zone. I think in enterprise video, when you have executives, when you have messaging and things like that, it's also a no-fail zone. You have no time for failure. Your transmission is a big deal. Your networks are a big deal. I think in a lot of ways, it's made me a better networker because I've been able to sort of make connections both in sports, but also in my enterprise engineering company as well, right? It's like I know who to go to fix things. I know who to find to sort of like find a solution. So I think that there's a lot of correlation between, like I said, reliability and between sports and video.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, one of the gotchas is, especially for people that do sports and then are tasked with doing enterprise video, is like, dude, you know, you did the All-Star game, you did the Super Bowl, you can't put on a frickin' video conference, you know?
Exactly.
It's like singing the national anthem. There's like no upside, you know? So Casper, you know, from an NEP standpoint, you know, you serve all these markets, and I'm wondering, where do you see those kind of fence-sitting technologies that are kind of useful, that were useful maybe in sports, or could potentially be used in enterprise from sports? What's your opinion?
I think the common denominator is the number of feeds or the number of cameras in sports or the number of screens that we put up in live events is so magnificent in size that we go more and more into IP networks to deliver these feeds to the screens or from the cameras in these deliveries. And I think that's the common denominator between sports and corporate, is that everything is becoming more IT-centered, more network-driven, more connected, more distributed, as Brett said, from a production workflow. And I think that's the key.
And then Todd, same question. I mean, you know, thinking about, so far we've hit on distributed production as being the main thing that, you know, is a takeaway from sports. And maybe, you know, frankly, I don't know where it started. Maybe it started in enterprise video and actually sports ripped it off after all. But Todd, what's your opinion on these emerging technologies from sports that are then, you know, used for enterprise video?
Our road to this was a little backward. We were running a financial news network for Charles Schwab when the pandemic happened. So like any other broadcaster running a network, we had to work to get everyone working safely from home that could. We happened to be building a new facility for them in Chicago and had to quickly convert that facility to be a remote controlled facility. Fortunately, before the pandemic, we were already kind of looking at what ESPN was doing in the realm of REMI, and so we had a head start. Long story short, we ended up building our own NOC in the cloud. We actually launched our sports division in 2021 at the same time we launched our cloud production facility and a series of REMI trucks. So all of the sports that we produce from the beginning for us is all REMI. So it's
so it started that way.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And Deon, from now you're the manufacturer on the panel. So now when you think about your enterprise and your sports clients, you know, who's taken from who?
Oh, wow, great question. So I do think it's a mixed bag, right? I think the sports world learned a lot from the corporate world in the way of telepresence and the fact, like latency, right? We've always depended on low latencies for sports. We've been using satellite links, fiber links. This is just my opinion, but I think that the world of compression and the world of high quality video at low latencies with mezzanine compression came from the corporate world, and sports learned from that. And then I think picture quality and the number of cameras, because in the sports world, you're always judged by how good your picture is. I do think, and please don't kill me for saying this, I think in the corporate world, we lived by the it's good enough philosophy for a long time. Your executives aren't taking that anymore, right? Because in a world of 4K, in a world of HDR, in a world where they can get a really great quality picture on their Sony Bravia TV sitting at home, they're gonna come to you and say, why can't our town halls look like this when you're connecting multiple campuses? And the good thing is, there is technology that's available to you on the market right now that can connect your campus in San Francisco and your campus in New York and get pretty much the same quality video that the sports teams are generating to put on the air. And, Mike knows a lot about that.
Yeah. Just jump ball for whoever wants to answer this one. What about budgets? Like, okay, that's great. Totally get you, man. I mean, you know what? Let's do a Super Bowl for our next, corporate, retreat or whatever. But what about budgets?
So I'll take the hit on this one. I honestly think the budgets are still going to be higher on sports because of where the revenue is coming from. The revenue's generated from ads, and there's always going to be someone wanting to pay for Super Bowl coverage and so on, right? So yeah, in the enterprise video world, your budgets are probably not going to be the same thing as a sports broadcaster. But that doesn't mean that you can't get near the same quality of video or near the same quality of production. The tools that are available. But it
didn't used to be like that, right? I mean, like it wasn't always that way. That just because you could say that wasn't really true 10 years ago, right?
No, correct. The technology has come a long, long way because 10 years ago, a 4K camera, a 1080p camera would have cost you $80,000. But now you can buy a $1,000 camera that gets you really high quality 1080 60p. So I do think that the tool sets, you get it in your phone, the tool sets have definitely worked their way down where there's a more level playing field for the corporate video content creator as well as the sports content creator.
Yeah, super cool. And we're going to talk some about the kind of bells and whistles side, and I'm going to set some time aside from that. But I am duty bound to ask about cloud, and that's just what we talk about at SVG conferences a lot. So I've been told that this is what we're going to talk about. But cloud-based production and how it relates to enterprise video. First, a quick definition of what it means to you, and second, how is that informing enterprise video production?
I would say cloud-based production for me in terms of the corporate world, I would define it as something that's far more mobile, requires a lot less physical on-prem equipment. I would say I found that easier to integrate in corporate production in my experience, just because of that initial comment about almost the bar at first was a little lower. I wasn't being asked to do a 30 camera shoot with 12 MEs and things like that in a corporate production. I am really curious to hear from this group on the sports side of things, how cloud production from an operations standpoint scales when you are looking for a much more complicated, deeper workflow.
Todd, you want to jump on that real quick in terms of sports productions and complex, how does cloud scale with complex sports productions, and then how does that inform what we can and can't do with enterprise?
Yeah, so all of our production is cloud-based. We do some on-prem production that's all on-prem, but most of it is in the cloud. So we're sending the signals to our cloud. We feel that model has been really robust, and we've gone from back in 2021, where the scale of productions that we would do in sports would be a smaller scale, lower tier games, and that's consistently raised over the years as technology, over the short years, 4 years, because technology has advanced so quickly. So we can get all the signals back to our cloud, we can get it securely back to the cloud, reliably back to the cloud. It saves a lot on, about 70% on the travel expense. In the model that we have, and that certainly applies on the corporate world. We're using it there too.
Sure. Casper, on your side, in terms of NEP, obviously NEPs lean very heavily into the cloud for all manner of things, namely your anchor client being, at least starting with, Apple and MLS to be able to build, and I'm talking about US-based stuff, obviously been doing that for years elsewhere, but is that something that your enterprise clients are leveraging now?
I mean, first of all, what's cloud, right? You said it.
Yeah, right. Well, why don't you define it for us? Just clear up the mystery. Go ahead.
For me, it means software-based production, really.
Yep.
It's just running software on servers, and those servers can be in a public cloud, or they can be on-prem. There's no difference, in my opinion, that much between the two. And what we see is, because of the scale that you can create with servers and networked topologies, the weight and the size of kit goes down, which is a huge driver for enterprise video, because generally with large events, what we see is that they don't want us in the room. They want to keep the room for the event, and they don't really want the cameras or the crew in the room. So having the ability to kind of connect the cameras in the room to your cloud-based productions, operating it remotely, gives a lot of flexibility and opportunities. And I think we see the same in sports, where the distributed workflows that we have, where LA, New York, South Florida, and Dallas, in our case, are all working together as one unit. Those type of workflows we'll see rise in the future.
So is there some kind of cap at this point? Like if somebody asks you to do a show and, says, okay, listen, you're the expert, is this more of a cloud thing or is this more of an on-prem thing? I mean, where's the bar for that? Is there one?
Partly cost, partly like what a client is comfortable with, right? Like certain clients are more comfortable with a more hardware-based solution or multiple redundancy topologies in the delivery. Others have more trust in software-based production. So I think it's very dependent on what the client requires. But in general terms, everything is possible, and I think the payoff is how much latency are you willing to accept in your production, and how much reach do you want to get to as well, and how many different flavors of the same program do you want to create?
So Andrew, you've heard a lot about cloud production in terms of what it means to people. Like, what does it mean to you, and how's that being used in your productions?
Yeah, so I think what's interesting is we still haven't figured out whether cloud is more beneficial from a financial or operations standpoint, right?
I'm glad you said that, because I don't think that it's inherent. I mean, from a travel standpoint,
travel for 100%.
Sure. Like that's done. But from the other stuff,
correct,
it's very difficult to determine.
It is, but I will say the one implication that I think is important to remember is post-production. So for us, we're using it in a lot of post-production workflows, and that's allowing us to have a distributed workforce, distributed editing force throughout the globe. And I think that for us as well, we can have a media lake with tons of footage that we can start doing a bunch of AI training on as well, to do metadata tagging, things like that, be able to edit from anywhere in the world and do that in a faster way, right? We just got off Davos, where we were able to send footage back from Davos back to our editors in New York within seconds, right? And they're able to edit that stuff, get it on our social channels within minutes, even hours sometimes. That was unimaginable before, right? So I think that the cloud is allowing us to do that. And like I said, it's really more implications for us from a post-production standpoint at the current moment with, again, I think on the events side, with live events for us, that's where cloud sort of can be useful. But I think, again, we're still trying to figure this all out. Like, I'm asking a lot of questions about it, and I think this word gets thrown around so much. And it's really great. Listen, there are great things here, but I want to ask more questions and figure out what does this really get us from an efficiency standpoint?
I'm glad you said it, because, I mean, just by uttering the word cloud doesn't necessarily make it cheaper. It does in some respects. And sometimes when you're, and then it also depends on what you're really talking about, right? I think somebody said software-defined production. That's kind of how I go with this, because, if you do command and control or, those kinds of things, well, technically, I guess that operates in the cloud if you squint, but it's something else in my view. Does anybody disagree with that, Todd?
Yeah, I would say for us, we offer both hardware and software versions in the cloud. So at our NOC, we have a bunch of traditional control rooms that look like any that you would see in a major truck. And so we're bringing the signal back there, and we're producing it like any other game or event. And then we offer cloud-based solutions. So for me, cloud is a couple of things. Ours is about centralizing the technology and decentralizing the production teams. But we offer whether it's a pure software-based solution or a hardware-based solution. And then there's also the private cloud versus the public cloud.
Sure.
And for us, we built our own private cloud, so that has big economic impacts too that someone would need to look at.
Just how so would you say, like in terms of private versus, like I'm curious about that a little bit, and how that may be more germane to enterprise or sports, or really doesn't matter?
Yeah. I think it applies to all of them. When you look at a public cloud, the pricing for that appears at first to be very inexpensive, but then it's a use basis that gets you. And then a private cloud, well, that is price based on that cloud owner. So, for us, we had to come up with a whole nother model. It was very complicated to figure it out, but of what works for us as a business and what works for our clients. And for us, we feel it's more cost effective, and there are other advantages too, but NEP's certainly done a lot in the private cloud, so I guess.
Yeah, but I think it's also dependent on how you look at things, right? Like, I think the full investment of doing a production is much more than just that cloud piece. It's like that cloud piece or the back end of the system is probably 20 to 30% of your full investment. The rest is really the control positions and, the monitor screens and everything you need to run a production. Like I think people sometimes underestimate how much investment goes into that bit versus, just running some applications, again, on software in a public cloud or in a private cloud.
It sounds like to me, Deon, that, when we're talking about sports and enterprise, some of it is somewhat indistinguishable. Yes, there's a budget threshold, and I'll just make you the money guy now, since you're the vendor on the panel. Maybe that's where we've gotten, is that, it's a lot of these techniques are somewhat, ubiquitous no matter what you're doing, right?
Yeah, and I think that's because the lines are blurring between, there really is no line, right? The output and your audience might be different, but how you produce the content, what you're capturing is pretty much the same. Yeah, you're not tracking a football going, through the air and being caught by a wide receiver, but you're capturing high quality video.
Not unless maybe you're doing a corporate event for a Wilson Corporation or something like
Fair
that.
point.
Yeah.
Fair point. You could be shooting a basketball commercial or something like that. But at the end of the day, you're capturing content, you're producing content. The workflows for live production are pretty much the same on sports, for news, as well as it is for corporate. Now, I agree with all the answers with regards to cloud here, and we have taken the approach of a hybrid approach where you can use traditional hardware, you can use virtualized software that you can keep on-prem, or you can use true total private cloud, public cloud solutions. In fact, if you go and search SVG's website, there's a fine piece of journalism about how our friends at NBC Sports utilized one of our solutions for a big multi-sports event last year. Can't say the name of it, but you'll figure it out. So at the end of the day, the lines are blurring very quickly. The technology is available now. And from the only thing I'll add from the finance perspective is, and I agree, we have to look at cost savings, because your management is going to ask you, well, how much money is this saving me? But I like to flip the script very often and ask, well, what is the technology enabling that's maybe generating more money? Maybe you're generating efficiencies. Maybe you're generating more emotion. Maybe you're generating more engagement. If you can show the metrics that the audience that's viewing your content is now more engaged, or you're generating more revenue because of the higher quality video or more content that you're producing because you've moved to cloud, I think you have a better chance of winning that argument, because people are right. Cloud isn't cheap, IP isn't cheap, but again, it's all about how much more are you able to do because of that technology.
Yeah, how much more, and what we always say, what's actually going to hit the screen and what is going to end up being your ROI. And it doesn't have to be a financial ROI. You can make a CEO happy, I guess. That's a pretty good ROI. Yep. All right, so I saved the funnest stuff to last, which is basically embracing new tech, production values, the real whiz-bang shit. Like, we're talking about augmented reality, hell, super slow motion I've seen in enterprise video. Like some of this stuff that we really use, the ball tracking, those kinds of things. What are those kinds of interesting video techniques, interesting broadcasting techniques that are used to delight an audience in an enterprise side versus a sports side? I'll take anybody who wants to go first.
I really like, well, I was talking to the drone guys out in the hallway. I'm an FAA 107 pilot and done a lot of work, freelance work, working on shooting drone shots for sports. And it's like, it's common. We've had a blimp for how long? You know, it's those are types of shots that you don't typically get in corporate video. And it's been really exciting to see in the past handful of years that especially companies like Apple have really leaned into putting in some neater shots, whether it be something around drones or even adding in augmented reality or other types of VR that they can almost fake it, like when no association with Apple, but just thinking about how they've done some of their shots where they've had executives jump out of airplanes before their keynote, and then, you know, it jumped into some magnificent drone shot. I don't know. It's stuff like that that I think it's really cool because the technology is almost getting more accessible, more affordable, that corporate's able to lean into it both creatively and
Right, both in post and live, all that stuff, and aerial shots. Casper, I think that believe it or not, we have not said the word AI on this panel yet, and this is about to change, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, in the enterprise domain, what we see is when we put up these large LED screens for large corporate events, is that there needs to be a lot of content on those screens. So what we see more and more happening is the use of AI to generate the content that's on those screens. That's one of the big innovations that we see.
Which is one of the big things, right? Like every time you see a set designer put an LED screen or something, it's like, okay, well, that costs money. Not just in what it is what you need to feed it, right, Deon?
That's exactly right. And so using generative AI to create that content, but also leveraging the virtual production aspect of it, right, which is a big topic in this space as well, is building those LED screens and creating virtualized sets, being able to create dynamic backgrounds. Imagine that town hall meeting where instead of having to filming it on location, you could do it inside a ballroom in your campus and create different backgrounds that all look realistic to the end user.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, one of the biggest sort of enterprise video things that exists are the upfronts, right? The upfronts are like crazy, you know, spend it all kind of things that need to absolutely hit people on the head, right? That's some of the stuff we're talking about, right?
It's all about the engagement. It's like, what's going to capture users' attention? Because let's be real, we've all seen very boring, not compelling corporate video, and we've seen the complete opposite. What are you more engaged with? What brings about what we call condo, that emotion that's going to draw your audience into the video and really get them to latch on to those messaging? And that's why they spend so much money on those upfronts.
Todd?
I would say definitely the LED screens are being incorporated a lot more. We do a lot in the upfront and new front space, and so that, you know, they'll pull out all the bells and whistles, and also in virtual set technology is another area that we've seen a lot of growth in the corporate side.
Right, and again, it's because some of these costs where you wouldn't be able to even think about that kind of thing have now come down to a manageable level. And what you said about, you know, AI content, you know, filling these kinds of screens certainly helps. So I think Andrew, you get the last word on the whiz-bang stuff. So let's hear something impressive.
So I think it's two things, right? It's like knowing your applications, right? Because I think the part of the challenge, at least for us, is like you don't need to do the whiz-bang VR or sort of like virtual set version for a corporate video every time, because it doesn't necessarily need that, right? So it's like, how do you balance something that looks sort of hacky or like sort of, you know, downplayed or sort of made like to be a video that looks like it was sort of shot on an iPhone, it was run and gun kind of thing. And then how do you also make a video that maybe does have sort of AR elements, that has sort of virtual set elements? Like, what are those applications? That's the big question that I ask my team all the time. I'm sure I annoy the hell out of them all the time because they're like, why do you keep asking me? And it's like knowing how to apply these things, right? Like knowing that spectrum. So yes, we are getting to a point where like we can put avatars into VR video. We can put real people into sort of these virtual sets, create any sort of number of like backgrounds for any client. We're doing a lot with sort of advertising video now. So it's like we're working with a brand. How do we put their video in there quickly? We know they're coming in 2 weeks. We got to create something easily repeatable, scalable. We do it through this stuff. But again, it's also knowing when to say, okay, we just need to go out and shoot this on an iPhone with a Rode mic and call it a day, right? So it's like knowing how to balance and knowing how to apply like what kind of video you're using.
Right, not technology for technology's sake.
Correct.
Right? Even though we do that sometimes. All right, well, I want to thank my panel. They've been fantastic. Guys, We nailed it.